Excel just released a new feature and it's called Python. Now Python is available in Excel. If you click here in the Formula tab, you can see Insert Python. And the benefits to use Python here in Excel can be a lot. So for example, you can do automations with Python, you can do machine learns, or also you can do charts, data analysis that usually you cannot do using Excel. So let's take a look here in this video, an overview how can we use Python in Excel with some practical examples. To start to use Python here in Excel, I can either click in any blank cell, let's say this one right here, I2 for example, and then equal sign py. That way I got here the Python function. I can double click here, want you to select this function. I can either input here all the code that I need within this cell, or I can also use here the formula bar to type it in everything that I need to. I can also just input here the Python function through another way. So for example, I'm gonna stay with this selection right here. I'm gonna click in Formula tab and then Insert Python. I'm gonna click here, and in the same way as before, I already got here the Python function. Let's start giving Python some information. So I'm gonna create here a data frame that basically is some informations that are saved as one specific cell, just one cell. So for example, I'm going to select here, I already have this data set and I have the date, the sales through 5 different years, 2021, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to select here this entire data set. So I'm going to click here, select everyone to the last row, for example, like this. Now, if I press, I can just see here through the formula bar, it's easier. If I press enter, nothing's gonna happen because if I just press enter, I'm gonna have here a new blank row, okay, a new line. So instead of using enter alone, I need to use control enter. And as you guys can see, now I got here a data frame. This data frame, basically, as I said before, is taking all the data set that I just select and it's saving within this specific cell right here. But if you want to show what you have within this data frame, you can either click here in show card, for example, that you're gonna have some summarized data, or you can also click here above in this icon Python object, click here in this down arrow and then Excel value, for example. And as you guys can see, now you got the same data set as you have here to the left. Let's make some changes here to my data frame, because let's say I'm gonna have a lot of data frames here. Let me just shrink this data frame. So I'm gonna click here, Python object, and now I got here just one cell that is my data frame. Basically, let's imagine that in each one of the cells that you have here, you have a different data frame. Maybe it's a little bit complicated to use a lot of data frames here in Excel, but there's an easier way to use data frames. You can give a data frame a custom name, for example. So I'm going to click here in this data frame, and as you guys can see here through the formula bar, just before everything, I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to give it a name. So for example, my data set, for example, space equal sign space, and then I'm going to Control Enter to confirm, and we're done. So now this data frame right here is called my data set. And whenever I need to use this data frame, I don't need to select manually all over again this data set. I just need to call my data set, and that's it. Knowing that, let's move on here to the example number 2. And here I want to create a data set too. I'm going to click here in any blank cell, for like this, for example, and then I go to Formulas, Insert Python, and then I'm going to select this entire green data set that I have here to the left, like this, for example. I can press here, Control Enter, and as we did before, I'm going to give it a name. So for example, this one right here is going to be my green data set, space equal sign space, Control Enter. Okay, we're done. Let's move on to the third one, and I'm going to do the same thing here. Equal sign py, double click here, 1, 2 to select, and then I'm going to select here this entire data set that I have. And before I press here Control Enter here in the beginning, my black data set, space equal space, and then Control Enter. Okay, so we're done. Now I have basically here 3 different data frames into my Excel spreadsheet. Python has something that we use to call method. Now we can use this method and see the benefits of using this method. Let's start with the simplest one, in my opinion, for example, that is .describe. The describe method is gonna give you a description of your data set, of your data frame. That is, the data frame indeed is your data set, okay? Click here, let's say, in this cell G4, for example, and then equal sign PY, double click here, 1, 2. Now I want to have a description of my data frame, for example, of my data set. I can do it in two different ways, for example. I can either select here the cell within where I have my data frame and then dot describe, open parentheses and then close parentheses, control enter, for example. Then I'm gonna have here a description. Let me show you guys. I'm gonna click here in Python object, Excel values. I'm gonna have here a description that I'm gonna talk about it later. What do we have here? But I can also do it in one different way here. Equal sign PY, double click here, 1, 2. Instead of select this data frame right here, remember what I said before, that maybe I can have a lot of different data frames. So this data frame right here is called my green data set. And then dot, as you guys can see, you can follow along also here. So my green data set dot describe, open and close parentheses. If I press here Control Enter, as you guys can see, I also got here the data frame itself, the description of my data frame. I can click here in Python object, Excel values, and here I have, for example, the count, the average of all the values that I have, the minimum value, and also here the maximum value. I have basically two columns that the data frame is using as reference, the quantity and the unity price, for example. And here I already have my first analysis using Python Excel. We can use the describe method, for example. And one cool thing here is we can filter all these informations that we have. So here, basically, when I'm using a describe method, I'm going to create here a new data frame, for example. I'm going to do basically the same thing, but I don't want to show here these two columns, quantity and unity. Let's say I just want to see informations, the description about the unity column. I can just go here to a new cell, for example, and then equal sign, PY, double click here. I'm going to use the formula bar because it's larger. We can see it better. My green data set is the data frame that I'm going to use. Dot describe, open and close parentheses. Okay, we already know how to do it. We already see it. But let's say, now I don't want to see these two columns right here, quantity and unity. I just want to see the unity column. For example, that is the column that I have here, the column C. So I can filter and see just the informations, only the informations that I have here in the column C, for example. Just before here, this dot, I'm gonna open here the square brackets, for example, and then open quotations. And here I'm gonna type in quantity, close quotations, and close these square brackets, for example. Now I'm going to press here Control Enter. And as you guys can see, I'm going to have here a series. I can click here in the Python object and Excel value, like this, for example. Basically, I have the same information because we are using here the same method, that is the describe method. But here I have more specific information that is just about the, oops, I made a mistake here. Instead of using the unity column, I just type it in there, quantity. But I can change here. So instead of using quantity, I want to use unity. Control Enter. Just take a moment and yeah, be done. So instead of just using these two columns right here, or 3, 4, 5, 10 different columns, I'm just using one right here, the unity column. So this is how can we just filter informations through Python, through a data frame. Another cool method that we can use is the method called correlation, or CORR. So let me show you here. This data frame that I have here is called my data set. Okay, so here below we're gonna use any blank cell. So this one, for example, equal sign equal sign PY, double click it, my data set dot. Here I want to use the correlation method. I want to see if there is some correlation between each one of these columns that I have here. The sales, the values that I sold in 2021, 2022, 3, 4, and 5. Let's see if there is some correlation, and let's see what is the years, what is the columns that just have the lowest number, for example, and the highest one, and so on, so on. Dot CORR, open and close parentheses, and then Control Enter. I have here a new data frame, but I can click here Python object and change to Excel value, for example. Okay, here we got the data frame itself. I can compare each one of the columns against each other. So let's say here, I want to take the sales of 2023 and compare with sales in 2024. For example, we're going to have here this result right here, 0.93, for example. Comparing this value right here, 0.93, with all the other values that I have, it's a low value. So there's not much correlation between these two values. If you have just got one as result, it is because you have 100% of correlation. And as you guys can see, all these numbers here in this diagonal here is equal to 1, because basically I have here, for example, the sales of 2023, and also here I have the sales of 2023. So this is why I got 1, exactly 1, because I am comparing basically the same thing. So this is why I have here the 1, because it's 100% of correlation. It's the same data, basically. If you got, let's say, a negative number, it's because you have inverted correlation. And if you got, let's say, 0, it's because it's no correlation between the data that you are compare against each other. And as we saw before, that you can filter the data that you have into your data frame, or if you are using a method, you can also filter and just see specific columns, specific data within your method. You can do the same here. So let's say, instead of you just see and compare all these data frame that I have here, all these columns that I have, I just want to compare the sales of 2022 and 2023, for example. I can go here to the formula bar, and just before this dot, I can open these square brackets, open quotations, and I'm going to type it in here, sales 2022, for example, close quotations, comma, open quotations again, sales 2023, and then close quotations, close square brackets, and one more time I need to open and close these square brackets. Every time that you are using a filter that you have more than just one condition, one value filtered, let's say that way, you need to use two times. You need to open two times the square brackets and also close two times. So here I'm gonna open again these square brackets, and here I'm gonna close it again. Control Enter, and as you guys can see, now I have here a more specific correlation between these two data that I have. Of course, I'm using here a large data set, but I'm just comparing here two columns. I can come back here now to my example number 2, and as you guys can see in the column B, basically here this data set is a stock report where I have all the products here in the stock, but I have a lot of products here in the column B that appear just more than one time. So for example, vitamin D here, and I also got again the vitamin D here, for example. Let's say I want to create a unique list of all this column B that I have here. So I want to take all the values, and everything that is repeat itself, I want to read it off. I want to create a unique list, the values that will not repeat itself. I can use a method in Python that is called unique. So I'm going to click here in any blank cell, equal sign py, double click in this function to select. I can just click here in this data frame. I know that I can use the name of the data frame instead, but I'm going to just click there, dot. Now I'm going to use here the function called unique. Open and close parentheses, and before you press Control Enter, just here, after this parenthesis, before the dot, you need to specify to the unique method which one of these columns that you want to use as criteria, for example, as reference. I want to use as reference, as criteria, the product column. So we're going to just type it in here, product, but I'm going to just put this word in between quotations marks, so quote, unquote. And also I need to type it in here, square brackets, open and close square brackets. Control Enter. It's calculating for us. Okay, so here I have an array. I can click here in Python object and change to Excel value, for example. Now I have here a list of unique values. And as you guys can see, this list that I have right here is smaller than actually my data set. So it's correct. My data set have a lot of products that appear just more than one time. So, of course, obviously, my unique method is filter for me and read it off all the values that just appear more than one time, okay? Before we create a chart in Excel using Python, through the data set, the tables that we have, I want to show you this website right here called Seaborn. Seaborn basically is a library where you have a lot of cool things about Python that you can use in Python, for example. So I know that Excel have a lot of charts, column chart, bar chart, line chart, and so on, so on. But here, basically, we have a lot of other different charts to use in Excel. Now that we can use Python Excel, we can take this Seaborn library and use in Python. And because we have Python within Excel, now we'll have access to a lot of different charts. So for example, I'm going to take here a chart that let's say this width map right here. I can click here. A new window is going to appear here for me. This is a plotting a diagonal correlation matrix. I can use this chart and replace all these informations that I have here using my actually data set that I have in Excel. But I'm going to show you guys how can we do it. Let me just copy here this code. So I can copy here and I can come back to the Excel. And here, let's say I'm going to go to the example 3. And let's say in this cell right here, I'm going to equal sign py, double click here to activate this Python function. And within the Python function, I'm going to press Ctrl V to paste all the code that I just copied before. I'll not change anything here, but of course, I'm going to show you how can we do a chart here in Excel using Python through the dot plot, for example. With this example that I just copy and paste here into the spreadsheet, I'm going to press here Ctrl Enter. And as you guys can see, I'm going to have here an Excel chart, image basically, but I'm going to change it to Excel values. And it's going to be so small that we can't actually see, like this, for example. So to see this chart right here, basically we're going to need to increase the size of the cell. And we can do it either increase the size of the columns and the rows, or select a large range, for example, and merge all the cells together. So let me do it. I'm going to select here a bunch of new cells like this, for example. And I'm going to click here, Home tab, and I'm going to merge everyone, merge and center like this, for example. So here we have a new and different chart in Excel that is basically a heat map chart, for example, or kind. And of course, you can use also a lot of other different types of charts here in Excel now that we have access to Python. I'm going to stick with this one right here, and let's move on and create our own chart here in Excel. With this data set that I have here, I want to create, let's say, a line chart, just a common chart in Excel to compare and to see the evolution of my sales, all the values sold through the weeks that I have here, through the date. And the best chart to use to create this visualization is a line chart, for example. And to create this chart in Excel using Python, through Python, I can basically click here in any blank cell. So I'm going to choose this one right here, for example, equal sign py, double click to select. Now I can either, as we just learned, click on the cell where I have the data frame, or I can also use the name that I just give to my data frame. So is, I think, my black data set. I think it's correct. Dot plot, open and close parentheses. This is the function that we're going to use now. Dot plot, open and close parentheses. But within the parentheses, I need to use the x-axis and also here, comma, the y-axis. Because it's when you build a chart, you have the x chart, the x-axis, and you also have the y-axis. Usually we use as the x-axis the dates, for example. So here we're gonna use the dates. Usually the y-axis we're gonna use the sales, for example, another value, sales. So I need to define this within the x and y. Right here I'm gonna type it in equal sign, open quotations, or better, in between quotations mark, I'm gonna use as my x-axis the date column. So the date, I'm gonna type it in here, date. And as my y-axis, equal sign, in between quotations, I'm going to use, let's say, the sales of 2021. Sales 2021. Let's see if it's going to work. Control Enter. I'm going to change it to Excel value. And as you guys going to see, the chart is so small that I can't see actually. But basically, I need to select here a range like this, for example, and merge all the cells together like this. Okay. Now I got here the sales of 2021 in each one of the weeks that I have. Okay, basically done. But let's say, and if you want to add, input another value here. If you want to compare the sales of 2021 with the sales of 2025, for example, if you need to add another column into your plot, how can we do it? We can basically here within the Y, just after this 2021, close quotations, comma. Now I'm gonna type it in here, another column that I want to use and to be plotted in the chart. So open quotations, sales 2022, close quotations, comma. I also want to see the sales of 2023. I also want to see sales of 2024 and also the sales of 2025. So I basically just type in here all the columns that I have in my data frame, in my spreadsheet. Just one step that we need to do now that we just learned before. Every time that you have more than just one information, you need to put all of this within a square bracket. So just after here this equal sign, open square brackets, and here I'm gonna close square brackets and then close parentheses as I already got here. Control Enter, and as you guys gonna see in 1 second, okay, the chart is here. Now I can compare each one of the sales that I have, each one of the values that I have sold. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. We basically have here an overview about Python in Excel. If you have any questions or any suggestions to the next videos, let me know, comment down below. Or if you have any questions about this video itself, let me know, comment down below, and I see you tomorrow. As every day has a new video, I see you there.